Good morning and welcome to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. I have a very special guest this morning who will not only discuss the issues that affect our city, but issues that affect our state as a whole. She'll also motivate you with her personal story of perseverance and survival. Rebecca Kleefisch is Wisconsin's 44th Lieutenant Governor. She's earned a reputation as a policy leader who doesn't shy from a challenge or a fight, and I'm excited to have her join us on Our Issues. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Andrea.
No, it's the pleasure is all mine. And we've got quite a bit to talk about this morning. Right off the bat, I'd like to focus on the issues. You chair the governor's task force on minority unemployment. So let's start there. Tell us about that.
Well, it's the great undercovered council of leaders and people who care deeply about developing our workforce among minority talent. This is a statewide issue. This is not just a Milwaukee issue, and so it's important that we develop statewide solutions. But uniquely, Milwaukee has a lot of leaders in this area, and so we've identified a number of challenges, a number of barriers in order to get folks who are in our minority communities to family-sustaining wage work. Things like transportation and childcare, things like entrepreneurship, even things like having a criminal record, things like homelessness. All of these things can contribute to hurdles that people have to jump over or find a way around in order to get to family-sustaining wage opportunities. And everybody deserves one of those. And the fact of the matter in Wisconsin today is everybody can have one of those. If you go to our totally free Department of Workforce Development job search website, it's called jobcenterofwisconsin.com, you can see that there are about 90,000 open jobs available on that site at any given day. Right. So when you say wow, you kind of wonder, well, gosh, you know, all those open jobs, what do they represent? And why aren't people taking these jobs? Well, here's kind of the conundrum we're in. It's a paradox, if you will, because we have all these open opportunities, and yet we still have people who are seeking work. And the average person says, well, how come all these job seekers don't just go over here to all these employers and just take all those jobs? Yeah. There, boom. One day, you've got all those folks hired and all of those job opportunities filled. This group doesn't necessarily have the skill sets that this group is looking for. The kind of space in between is called the skills gap. It's something that we're kind of building a bridge over right now through a variety of different solutions and programs, most of which have to do with education, either your science and technology, your English skills, or even your soft skills, your employability skills, which we've also identified as a bit of a barrier to get folks into the workforce. Because today's challenge is completely the opposite of yesterday's challenge. Because remember what the recession did to us. In the recession, we had all these people seeking jobs and not enough job opportunities for all of the job seekers. Well, today we have kind of a reversal of fortunes. So how do we get people prepared and ready to take the jobs that already exist? Through a number of our programs. We have our W-2 program, and we have our job centers. We have a number of not-for-profits that we partner with. Even in our corrections department, I was the executive sponsor of a grant for the Council on State Governance to get the type of research done here in Wisconsin to help both identify ways to reduce recidivism, recommitting crimes, to get you back into our corrections department, and increase work skills at the same time so that folks, when they are returning to the community from which they came, because 97% of folks who are in our corrections department will return to the communities from which they came, to get them the skills to not have idle time and not have idle hands, but instead be engaged people who can be a part of society. Those are the types of things that not only will get our workforce moving on all cylinders, but get our economy where it needs to be globally competitive.
Yeah, and when you look at all of the studies that are done, the Economic Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. last year revealed that unemployment among African Americans in Wisconsin in the year 2014 was the highest in any of the 50 states. So you're talking about these number of jobs that are available and people not having the skills to take on those jobs. So that is an issue. So are you working with different organizations around the state that are kind of pulling people in to help build their skills?
You got it. And it's essential because we can't be okay with that, right? We can't be okay with 50% of African American men being unemployed in Milwaukee. We can't be okay with the 21% unemployment rate for folks in Milwaukee. We can't be okay with that under any circumstances because today in Wisconsin we have a 68.8% labor market participation rate. So you got about 70% of folks who can participate in the labor market going to work. Well, the average person says, well, what about the 30%? What do they get to do? Do they not get opportunities? We're saying we have opportunities and we want people to take advantage of those opportunities, but we want to make sure that people are prepared to take advantage of those opportunities. Part of that preparedness starts in K12 education, believe it or not, and properly preparing our little ones for adulthood. NAEP, which is the closest thing we have to nationwide school testing, will begin this year, Andrea, to test on character. Can you imagine being tested as a little kid in school on your character?
Yeah.
So this is indicative of, I think, a nationwide trend. Employers are looking for men and women of character, people who understand how to show up on time, show up every day, come back from lunch, pass a drug test, look them in the eye, make sure that they are delivering deliverables on time, understand the chain of supply, understand the chain of command. And 20 years ago, these things might have been just kind of built in to how a household raised a child.
Right.
Things are a little bit different today. And we need to acknowledge today's reality, and we need to teach kids in that context. And so part of that is character building and character education inside our K-12 schools. And I think if NAEP is going to be testing on it, Wisconsin needs to continue to score well on things like that. Already we got the second highest graduation rate in the country, second highest ACT scores in the country. But when you have an unemployment rate that is 21% for folks of minority descent in Milwaukee, that's not a good continuum. You can't have kids who are being educated in our K-12 system not go on to have fruitful job opportunities.
I couldn't agree with you more. And when we look at the situation, especially with education, a lot of it leads right to the issues that we talk about every week on this show. Wisconsin having the highest number of African American men behind bars and things of this nature. Things that the state can't possibly be proud of, but it is something that is there. Everybody's aware of it, and now it's up for us to all work together to see some changes. So I think it's important when looking at these crisis areas that the alignment progress kind of balances out on a city, county, and state level. What are your thoughts on that being the end result?
Well, what we need is alignment on the city, state, and county level. And I think that we could do more and do better in that regard. I think right now on the state level, you're seeing a good amount of success. Perfect example. My husband, it just so happens, chairs the Criminal Justice Committee in the Wisconsin State Assembly. His colleague from Milwaukee, LaTanya Johnson, is someone who he has worked with on a number of bills in order to stop human trafficking. I mean, literally, this is child prostitution, and it happens in Wisconsin, in the Midwest, in the United States. I mean, it's hard to even fathom, but it's real, and they had bills in order to stop this. So he saw in LaTanya a great partner, someone who would work with him on combating crime all across the state. But if you specifically want to drill down on crime in neighborhoods that are neediest for preventing and stopping crime where it starts, well, then they saw an opportunity to combat gun violence as well. Both Joel and LaTanya ended up having to stand up against their own caucuses in order to get these bills even to the floor, which is sad, right?
Wow. Yes.
Because what we need to do is have good compromises where folks who are very pro-Second Amendment, and listen, we have the Second Amendment for a very important reason, right? We don't want to see tyranny in the United States of America. We don't want to see a monarchy or an oligarchy in the United States of America. We're a democratic republic. We believe we can govern ourselves, and we've done pretty darn well for the last couple hundred years. But at the end of the day, we also know that there are scofflaws, there are lawbreakers, there are criminals, there are people with evil minds and evil intent, and they do not care who gets in their way. And those are the people who have gotten their hands illegally on guns, and we need to crack down on those people with laws that exist, but we also need to make sure that we have judges that will sentence those people to the time behind bars that they are deserving of. Because when you see children, my girls' ages, dying in Milwaukee, dying because someone thought their use of an illegal firearm was more important than a child's life, well, I wish we could lock them up and throw away the key.
There's just no regard when these criminals get their hands on guns for their own whatever reasons they have in mind. No regard for the people who are around.
But here's the thing. Those people were not born that way. Those people were not born evil. I think it's hard to believe that a brand new baby can come out with the intent
I agree.
of wanting to harm someone.
Conditions really condition the mind.
Part of this is, we have this big discussion of nature versus nurture, right? And even in policy making, you have to have this discussion about nature versus nurture. And some of it is the environment in which people grow up, which breeds desperation and hopelessness, that breeds bad choices, lack of coping skills, unable to manage anger, and in with the wrong people. And so you combine all of those circumstances and you get this explosive point where it becomes a culture of acceptance of hopelessness and an acceptance of death as a part of the culture. And I think that's unacceptable.
I agree with you, and a number of guests that I've had where we've talked about this very subject. The issue is that we're continuing to see jails being built and people are going away for a long time. They come out and there's no result of them being a better person. They go right back to the same conditions, and sometimes they're an even worse person than they were when they went in. Namely, we were talking about this with the young people who are carjacking and how everybody wants to see them pay and go to jail for a much longer period. But I think that the argument and the hopes are that there are some type of programs put in place to help them for when they are out of the jail system, that they don't revert back to the same scenarios that led them there in the first place.
Yes, so you are 100% right on all those things. So first of all, we need to prevent, right? Part of that is in K12 education. Part of that is in good wraparound care and services through a number of different community organizations, but also, through educational components and outreach. So we need to make sure that in the neighborhoods that we are building, there are good and important wraparound services that already exist, but sometimes people don't know where they are. People don't know that they even exist. Do you remember when we met? We were at a free community health fair at the Isaac Cogg's Health Center.
Yes.
We went and we were down in the basement and we saw all sorts of folks walk in through that door. And do you know that there were women who told me that when they were working the tables upstairs, they were bringing folks from table to sign them up for the benefits that they have already been eligible for. Benefits that were already created years ago, but benefits about which they knew nothing. So part of this is making sure that people know and understand what they have access to, because politicians over time have created lots of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But if the stuff isn't working because nobody knows the stuff exists,
Are being utilized, yeah.
we got a problem.
Yeah, and that's part of what we're trying to do with this show, is make people aware of what's out there, how they can utilize it, and how together we can change lives. We're going to go to a break in just a little bit, but first I wanted to talk about you being a proud graduate of UW-Madison.
Sure.
And there are a lot of concerns out there with the cuts that have gone on with the UW-Madison, well, not just the Madison, but the UW system as a whole. But there are a lot of people who are under the impression that there have been cuts with the public school system, and you're here to say that's not necessarily true?
No, but I realize that there are a lot of people who have that perception out there because, you know, every time you have politics involved, there are proponents and opponents of any set of policies. And in fact, the budget that the governor signed, it has no cuts to K12 education. In fact, you know, there's an increase in sparsity aids and certain transportation aids. We've even reworked some of the definitions by which schools and libraries can get more broadband access. On top of that, through our Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, we've added about $150,000 in grants for K12 education to put up what we call fabrication laboratories. So if you care about getting your kids involved in science, technology, engineering, and math, and you should, because if you know a kid, science, technology, engineering, and math are the careers of the future.
Yes.
For every graduate, you are going to see 2 job opportunities for every 1 graduate of a 4-year degree in STEM fields. So this is really important. So these fabrication laboratories are opportunities for K-12ers to really do project-based, hands-on learning where they can incorporate skills that they will use in the world around them. So no, there was actually additional opportunities built into this budget and no cuts to K-12 education. But you're right, there were some changes to our University of Wisconsin system budget. And you're right, I am a proud graduate and alum, a badger of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. But I think what we need to do today is take a look at our student loan debt crisis in America.
I agree. Yes.
And we also need to consider the fact that we were on a very dangerous path, a collision course, if you will, with student loan debt in Wisconsin, as the University of Wisconsin system constantly went back to the wallets of the students in order to meet the requirements, so to speak, of faculty and administrators and people who wanted to build buildings. And we need to be very cautious about that, because every year around this time, we see newspaper articles and we watch the network affiliates and shows like yours where we hear about graduating the class with the largest student loan debt load in American history.
Yes.
And you know, there's going to be a day where I'm part of that conversation. My kids are 13 and 10, and we're saving. And you know,
tuition is constantly going up around America.
And I'm constantly trying to get them to get good grades, right? But you know, when you see the trajectory every other state is on, and when you see that Wisconsin, under Governor Scott Walker, has frozen tuition at our University of Wisconsin system schools for 4 years straight, well, that's a really different place than a lot of schools and a lot of students across this country. We need to look at the people who are paying the bills and who are sentenced to pay those bills for life. Now, I understand that they sign up for it. And I understand that, you know, the people who tell them to sign up for it are people who say, hey, you're going to make more money if you graduate with this degree. But they are still taking on the debt. And how much debt do you need to take on in order to accomplish your goal?
Before you even start your life. Yeah, it's true. It's true. So all very interesting things, and I thank you for stopping by and especially looking at these issues, because sometimes they get those quick headlines and people don't get to hear it from, I don't want to call you a horse, but the horse's mouth.
That's all right.
So to speak.
You know what? I've been called so much worse. I'm okay with that.
But I want you to stick around if you can, because we've talked about the issues, and now I want to give the viewers at home a chance to know more about you as the mother and the wife and all those good things, all right?
Sounds good.
All right, when we return to Our Issues Milwaukee, we will continue our conversation with Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch, and we'll do that right after this.